Hey everyone, welcome to Taking the Pulse, a healthcare and life sciences video podcast. I am Heather Hoops Matthews here with Maynard Nexon healthcare attorney Lauren DeMoss. Lauren, good to be with you.
Great to be here, Heather.
And we are coming to you today live from SCbio's annual conference in Greenville, South Carolina. This is one of the Southeast's premier life sciences events featuring cutting-edge presentations and national life sciences leaders. And we're pleased today to have join us in this episode. Alan Andress is a senior manager of Deloitte, where he helps both Deloitte's Future of Health vision as well as the company's quantum computing practice. Alan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. I appreciate the time.
You are a champion of Deloitte's Future of Health vision, I know, which is Deloitte's vision on what it's going to look like 20 years from now. Will you tell us more about the initiative and what you forecast in the future?
Sure. Yeah, it's an exciting moment. I think it's great to be able to paint a vision of what the future will look like. And a lot of it is just to help our clients aspire to, where we can go. I see the future of medicine really being as predictive and personalized. And I think like today, just our standard of care, just being very focused on sick care. Just when we go to the doctor, you kind of walk away from your annual exam and just being like, okay, so how are we doing here? And, a lot of those external measurements, they're very surface level in fact. And I think, combining with where we're seeing diagnostics heading and then looking at where cell and gene is heading, there's a bright future in front of us. And I think a little bit of it is where we help companies look at their investment strategies, right? Like how are they looking, where are they investing their money, whether it be in molecules or technologies, things like that. Painting the technology landscape, right? Making sure that they understand, what's now, what's in the future, what's really far in the future. And that's a little bit of my exploration on the quantum computing practice. But there's a whole range. We're doing a lot of AI work right now, and that's really opened our customers' eyes in terms of let's experiment now. This is a now technology. And it's really exciting to see where things are headed.
Alan, greater data connectivity, interoperability will be a huge driver, will continue to be a huge driver of infrastructure in the healthcare delivery system. What can life sciences and healthcare organizations do now to kind of prepare for that being the driver, as opposed to your point, sickness being the driver?
Great question. So it's interesting, like I'm in the middle of a few implementations now, and you want to use an AI model and you're like, great. And it turns out that like a lot of just the same data science problems still exist, like data quality, right? Or how do we get the data, right? And so your information management landscape really starts showing its cracks. And so starting to evolve those strategies is very, very important. I would say the other things you should be looking at are, maybe some of the collaborations that you want to take. Maybe there's always a conversation of where do I get real world data? Right? Well, do I buy it from a vendor? Right? Well, it may be just making the right partnerships with academic medical institutions or with hospital systems, right? Or payers, right? So starting to form those collaborations now and pilot what's possible is extremely important right now.
Quantum computing, AI, like those are super cool, fascinating topics. I want you to take us into the future, 2040.
Sure.
What is an exciting shift that you envision?
So that's a really good question. My mind is definitely going on it. I think, if you show up to your doctor, first of all, wearables have already, they've already been, we all have the Apple Watch or whatever brand. And that's just the beginning, right? And so looking at other reasonable metrics that you can pull from someone on a daily basis that they're willing to say, hey, this is going to be part of my health regimen, part of what I'm willing to share, and then looking at it from a, who do I share that with? What's my hospital network? What's my doctor network? What's my payer? Who's my payer? And then as you move through that health spectrum, looking for those transitions, and that's going to be partially a balance between the measurements you take on a daily basis, the labs, the diagnostics that you perform on an annual or semi-annual basis, and then bringing that back into like a continuous computing environment. So as all that data comes back in, like your doctor isn't going to have time to just continually look at your health profile, right? But things like AI and clinical surveillance can actually come in and start looking and say, okay, the delta between the last couple of check-ins is really off. Now, how do we then further evaluate that? So I see it as, a continuous stream of the data coming in, it being analyzed, and then starting to say, okay, let's get the clinician to take a further look at this. And then once you actually see the need for some type of therapy or corrective action, ideally, a lot of these things can be changed through a lifestyle change. And then you can start heading back away from disease. So.
As we've learned and talked with more people who speak like you do about wearables in the future and using quantum computing or just supercomputing to watch all this, I've had to be educated to know it's okay to share all this data. And do you think there's like a huge education hurdle that you're going to have to get over?
Yes. You have to be extremely mindful of data privacy, right? Once it's out, it's out. Me personally, I always try to limit, what I do online and just the things that I sign up for, and making sure that there's trust with the institutions that you're working with. So I think you definitely have to look at that. I think also, in order for it to really take hold, we have to look at how do people, either monetize or secure the individual components of their health data and landscape. So I think that there's a little bit of empowering people to make sure that they're part of it and they want to be proactive to it. And honestly, if your data is out there being leveraged for different purposes, we need to make sure we know what those purposes are and have very granular permissions around what's happening, not just from a data, but from an algorithm and intellectual property perspective, but then making sure that you can tie that monetization back to the person or, the individual or the company that's building the IP.
And these are complex issues.
Yeah, I agree too. And I think there's an awareness of it. I mean, data privacy awareness has been around forever, but an awareness now of how it's being used and what kind of models it's being plugged into, that's huge.
That's where the lawyers come in.
That's right. I love that. So thinking about, you've mentioned personalized medicine and you've mentioned kind of concerns with the quality of data that's being used to kind of develop different models. Can you talk about kind of the work you're doing and how the goal is to kind of safely integrate certain models into delivering personalized medicine?
Yes. So, sorry, maybe reframe the question.
Yeah. So, personalized medicine, I think, is a goal, and we're using different data models to kind of, predict, but there's concerns with the, whether the data is accurate, whether it's, can be used. And do you think there's safety concerns with using it to kind of deliver personalized medicine?
Well, I think there's a couple things there. I think you have to separate out the data structure from then the data security, right? So when you're building the data models that are going to be used for an AI model, right, you're going to have a number of domains that have to come together, right? So your core, what's the information about the patient, right? What's the information about the disease? What's the information about the therapy? There's no one body that's going to come up. It's going to be evolved over time, and they're going to have to overlap. So there's different mechanisms and ontologies and data frameworks that you can use, to manage that. But once you get data down to a very atomic level of this is a value, right, and this is a measure, then you can then start saying, okay, well, what are the security permissions that you want to put around it? And then how do I want to move that around? And then, how do you deal with it at rest? How do you deal with it at transit? How do you deal with it within an algorithm? So one of the things that we're working on with companies is looking at like privacy preservation technologies, specifically like federated learning. So what we do in that case is that we could have models that can go into your data environments, compute, and then what they do is instead of sharing data back to a primary algorithm, they can share just the mathematical weights and then send that back. So there's no real data actually being shared. So those are some of the techniques that we can, balance fine-grained data and then also make sure that we can secure the privacy of it.
Right.
Makes sense.
In your quantum computing practice, and AI is going to be instrumental in all of this.
It is. What I would say is separate the two.
Okay.
So if you think about quantum computing, we're very good at building CPUs, right? Your regular Intel chips, your AMD chips, things like that. Then you've had graphical processing units. There's even tensor processing units, and there's other custom silicon that are coming out, to be very specific to either help a model out, help machine learning techniques out. They're very like domain specific processing. when you get to quantum, we are still figuring out what are we going to do. We still struggle to understand what the best ways to encode information. I mean, we know generally now how to build very complex data structures, break them down, add them together, do math really fast. Like, we're really good at that. But the challenge with quantum is that, there's the whole, do you use it as more of a sensing technique, right? The sensing technology, I mean, really, an MRI machine is really a quantum sensor. It's very base. We've had that for some time. But then when you get into computing, it's then, do we have the right algorithms to, circulate around, find an average, or compute some particular aspect within the data? So machine learning, optimization, anything where you're trying to simulate real physical life or real, chemistry problems, things of that nature, are going to be some of the earlier avenues for quantum computing. But again, we're still trying to figure out the basic algorithms, the basic data and coding structures, and everything we need to then build that stack up. There's been a great advancement over the last 5-10 years. There's still a ways to go, but we are learning a lot by experimenting. And actually what you see is there's a lot of quantum inspired mechanisms. So someone will come up with a technique for applying a quantum machine learning technique, and then they come back and they say, well, you know what? If I do that on a regular computer, I could simulate it. And actually what it came out with was a better regular algorithm. And that's actually a lot of what's happening today. So it's really important that we continue to experiment with quantum, but then also recognize that it's going to be a back and forth until we get things like quantum memory or just ways to interconnect them, so we can get a bigger computational space available for them.
Do you feel like the organizations you work with are ready to embrace AI, or do you think there's a lot of trepidation and concern about? It's an interesting balance to me, and we kind of talk about with folks, is it, yes, let's use it and let's use it to the best of our ability, or is it we have real concerns about using it?
So it's a bit of both. So being in the AI and data practice for life sciences, you've always historically gotten little pockets of interest within a company. Now, over the past year, now companies are saying the only way we're going to survive is if we adopt AI, and we have to do it now. With that, speed to adoption has also then said, okay, what are the guardrails that we need to put in place? So what's great is that we are reimagining all across the value chain from R&D through supply, through the commercial practice, and we have use cases. Targeted use cases to build those efficiencies, and then say, okay, now that you're no longer doing all of these types of activities, what are you going to do to unlock value, drive top line growth, things of that nature? So it's a great time. I think that the momentum has now shifted, and to grow in the future, it is part of. It's a requirement.
Yeah, I think we've realized that in the legal industry too. So
Yes.
that makes sense.
I actually have built a couple of contracting, not specific legal, but if you take from a legal perspective, then how do you then build your supplier contracts or your payer contracts? So there's a lot of just searching for. I have freight terms out there. Where did I use those freight terms?
Yeah.
Can I get an analyst to go scour across my contract repository and pull them out? And so there's a lot of that kind of first pass work that we're doing, and legal is a great space to start.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Alan Andress, Senior Manager at Deloitte. It's clear you like your job.
I do.
I also feel like you're
Yes.
on the frontier, the great frontier of what it's going to be in the coming years. Thanks so much for joining us today on behalf of everyone in the Pulse.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For those of you who joined us, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, we are live from SCbio's annual event here in Greenville, South Carolina, a leading life sciences event in the Southeast. We look forward to seeing you next time right here on Taking the Pulse, a healthcare and life sciences video podcast.